not, my friends, become addicted to
video memory.
It will take hold of you, and you will resent its absence.
So, yeah, today I was feeling a bit goofy when I made the intro for this video, but the preachings of Immortan Joe aside, that wasn't just a joke. Recently, I discussed with Steve from Hardware Unboxed that we both seem to be seeing the same thing. Game after game seems to need more than 8 gigabytes for comfortable 1440p gaming and more than 12 gigabytes for comfortable 4K gaming. It doesn't seem like there's just one or two outliers. It seems like a lot of cards out there right now that were quite popular a few years ago have a VRAM problem. And so I brought on an Unreal Engine 5 developer who told me, you're not crazy. They do have a VRAM problem. We've been trying to fit 1440p high graphics into 8 gigabyte cards for years now, and that required a lot of extra work that we're just not going to bother with pretty soon. If you want a game with an 8 gigabyte graphics card, fairly soon you're going to have to game in 1080p if you want to turn up any of the settings. And, well, in response, most of the viewers actually said, no surprise, we've had 8 gigabyte cards for less than $250 since 2016. This really isn't that crazy. But there was a decent amount of people that instead said, can you get on another developer to see if this is just an outlier opinion? And, well, I don't know if it's going to be the next guest, but very soon I'm going to have someone on from Infinity Ward. And this person actually has a lot of interesting things to say about what's going to happen when we drop last-gen console support and what standards need to happen to get better optimization across multiple platforms for the same game. But I will say this now, spoiler alert, he also says we need 32 gigabyte graphics cards for the high end, and that 8 gigabyte cards are on borrowed time. And so, yeah guys, it's not just an outlier. Every developer I talk to, every developer, to a man or woman, says 8 gigabyte graphics cards are going to continue to have more and more issues. You ask for more proof? Well, stay tuned for future Broken Silicons. I'm going to get you more proof week after week. But alright then, so if we all agree that 8 gigabyte graphics cards are on borrowed time for running games at higher resolutions, a lot of you are probably then screaming at the monitor right now, what the hell was Nvidia thinking when they designed Turing and Ampere with so little VRAM in the mid and low range? Well, there's probably a forced obsolescence thing going on here, where Nvidia says, look, we're going to design these cards to get the highest frames per second with the newest features when they launch, but as long as they win all benchmarks for the first 6 months, we don't really care if they fall apart in a year. If that makes people upgrade sooner, that's not really a bad thing in our world. But at the same time, I have been reaching out to a lot of contacts at Nvidia, and they tell me there is a very real reason why they're moving towards smaller and smaller buses for their mid-range and low-end cards. And the reason is this. I am told that right now, 8106, which was leaked by Moore's Law's Dead exclusively a few months ago to have around a 185mm square die, that tiny 185mm square die that's probably going to be used for the 4060 Ti, that 4060 Ti with 8 gigabytes is probably going to cost about the same to make as a TU106 RTX 2070. I was told, yeah, I mean, you might save $20 on the 4060 Ti compared to the 2070 due to not needing as expensive cooling, but since Turing came out, a lot of costs have gone up, and TSMC's silicon really has gotten that much more expensive, which, hearing this, you might think two things then. Number one, Turing is probably even more overpriced than a lot of people thought it was. I know everyone thinks Turing was overpriced, but when you hear that their mid-range card back then cost as much to produce as Nvidia's new low-end cards, it probably tells you they were milking harder than you thought, considering they were using a 12nm node while AMD was using a 7nm one. But, to be fair, number two, Lovelace, whether it's because Nvidia is being reckless with how they design their cards or not, does cost more to produce than the previous generations. And this was a point someone really stressed with me, actually. This person said, it's not just the cost of RAM per gigabyte. The cost of silicon per millimeter squared from TSMC has gone up astronomically, and I/O isn't shrinking. So if we give this a bigger bus, that adds more cost there as well. And furthermore, in laptops, going with smaller buses allows us to have a smaller footprint so we can fit stronger designs into more compact laptops where laptop purchasers have not shown they really are asking for more than even 6 gigabytes half the time. And if we think we can get away with that, that means we can fit a more stronger design into a smaller space and make higher profits. And so I guess this is where I warn you guys that while Nvidia is probably going to give enough VRAM in the high end and enthusiast range with their upcoming generations, in the mid-range and low end, Nvidia wants to keep the buses as small as possible to keep the dies as small and compact as possible so that they can fit these into laptops and make even greater margins. And really, what they're hoping for, I'm told, is that high-density, ultra-fast GDDR7 comes out as quickly as possible, so it's not as much of an issue in the low end. That's why Nvidia is driving for using the fastest GDDR6X, while AMD's not. They want smaller buses clocked faster to keep things compact so they fit on laptop. And yeah, the bad news about this, though, is I think there's going to be a very awkward period in the low end and mid-range over the next year and a half because, well, GDDR7 apparently is going up to at least 28 gigabit per second. And I was directly told this, that Blackwell wants to use 28 gigabit per second speeds in their upcoming generation. The density isn't increasing right away. They are hoping as soon as possible, apparently 24 gigabit densities come out, which, listen to what I'm saying here, that means a 24 gigabit density instead of a 16 gigabit density for chips. They could fit a 12 gigabyte capacity on a 128-bit bus. That's what they're hoping comes as soon as possible, but they don't think that's going to be ready for a little bit. They don't plan to use GDDR7 in any of their Lovelace cards right now, and so I just think the low end's going to have a rough spot to get through over the next year and a half, at least if you buy an Nvidia graphics card in the low end. And, well, I actually have much more to say about Nvidia's upcoming designs and also what I'm hearing about RDNA 4 at Navi 40. But before I get to this and talking about the grand strategy differences between Nvidia and AMD in graphics over the next few years, an ad from a sponsor. This Easter season, Jessie isn't looking for any colorful eggs hidden by creepy man-sized rabbits. No, she's usually looking for new tennis balls at the park or for where my friend's dog is hiding around the house. Me, myself, well, usually during the spring season, I'd be hunting for the best way to avoid paying monopolistic prices for Microsoft software. Well, that was until I was sponsored by CDKeyOffer.com many years ago. This piece of content is brought to you by CDKeyOffer.com, a long-term sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead for a reason. They've been good to me, they've been good to Dan, and they've been easy to work with, and they keep reliably providing the Moore's Law is Dead community with a product that I think PC gaming just needs. In a world where all of our components seem to keep getting more expensive, I don't think we should also have to be milked by Microsoft as well. So this Easter season, whether you're looking for Steam, EA, Uplay, or PlayStation keys, or Microsoft products as well, go to cdkeyoffer.com and use the offer code BROKENSILICON for 25% off all Microsoft products, and then Die Shrink for 3% off everything else on the website. Support Moore's Law is Dead by supporting cdkeyoffer.com this Easter season. Now, as you've probably already noticed, this isn't one of those videos where I put 1,000 quotes or an entire PowerPoint on screen for a bunch of hyper-specific leaks. I'm going to put a quote on screen soon, but for the most part, this video is about telling you the backstory and the mentality of the engineers at Nvidia and AMD. So don't look for a bunch of things to screenshot and share. Maybe just listen to what I'm saying. If you want to share what I said, actually listen to what I said and then share that. And the first thing I want to get to in this part of the video is some more of the backstory on what happened to Navi 31. You see, in the past month, I've gotten a lot more details on what went wrong, why AMD presented one level of performance, and then the 7900 XTX ended up performing a different way. And what I am told is that basically, maybe a few months before RDNA 3 was supposed to come out, an artifacting issue wouldn't go away. You see, when engineers and people working on the drivers are in the last stretch towards the launch of a product, there's totally expected to be some bugs and artifacts appearing on screen while you're using a new graphics card in a few games. But over time, it became clear that one persistent artifacting issue that wouldn't always appear right away, but always within a few hours of gaming would appear, It just would not go away. And this was then about a month before launch, and they thought, oh God, it's not always there, but it always eventually appears, and we can't sell a graphics card that just randomly starts having crap appear all over the screen. What are we going to do? In fact, I am told that they ran benchmarks, prepared the presentation, and then a day before they teased the RDNA 3 announcement is when the engineers in the driver department came up with a fix, and it was adding a very brief stall in the drivers so that you eliminate the artifacts. And so then AMD went forward with the presentation, presented performance from the benchmarks they ran on the 7900 XT and XTX, and apparently they thought that this stall didn't really have a big performance impact, but it at least had a small one, and it was not eliminated before launch. So that performance that AMD showed you guys before release, that was how the 7900 XTX was performing, apparently, if you had a bunch of artifacts appearing on screen after an hour of gameplay. And they were hoping, and have been hoping, to fix that issue over the coming months after launch. And, well, that's why RDNA 2 didn't even get any driver updates for months. It was all hands on deck to try to fix it, and apparently they still haven't gotten nearly as much performance back as they were hoping to. They were hoping, apparently, even to launch RDNA 3 on Black Friday, and December 15th, basically a week before Christmas, is when the upper management said is the last day they can release these cards. Even if they underperform, too bad, you gotta get them out. And, well, they're out, and that's where we are to this day. Now, the good news is that I hear they have at least some better fixes potentially in Navi 32 and 33, and that's why Navi 32... well, where is it? Seems to be taking extra time to come out, doesn't it? I think there's a very good chance that they have a fix they're trying to put into a newer stepping of the Navi 32 silicon, and that this issue is actually related to communicating between the MCDs, and they hope to have it fixed soon and at least scrape back more performance for their mid-range cards than they were able to for Navi 31 so far. But I'm not 100% sure on that yet. Although I am 100% sure that they say it's fixed in RDNA 4. And in fact, I'll put this quote on screen now. I'm told that RDNA 4, if they can get it working as well as they want to, is going to be a killer. It has the issues that were present in Navi 31 fixed, but it is very complex. But if they get it working, the price to performance is supposed to be good, and the performance itself, well, they said, good luck, Nvidia, if we can get this working as well as we think we can. And, you know, it's funny then. I took this information that was presented to me by AMD, and I do this all the time. I tried to get a quote from someone from Nvidia, like, what do you think about this? Does this scare you at all? And my Nvidia contacts, they basically just shrugged. They said they don't really care. They're not worried about it. And that's when I started really noticing the differences between Radeon and GeForce's grand graphics strategy over the next 5 years. No matter what they decide on the exact final configuration, I am told that Blackwell does have a very large and expensive top configuration. But what's interesting is I am told there is still a remote chance that the top 102 die will use chiplets, but that it's unlikely. And even if the top die does use chiplets, the rest of the lineup is going to be monolithic. Unlike AMD, where technically, if you look at it, Navi 31, 32, 33, 31 and 32 are not monolithic. Most of AMD's RDNA 3 lineup is not going to be monolithic. And although it might save AMD money on paper, Nvidia's totally fine with this. Nvidia's plan is to use chiplets as sparingly as possible compared to AMD so that they can make sure their products launch on time, every time, and because they service so many different customers, they're fine just having some golden samples that are more performant than if they use chiplets because they don't have the communication penalty that a multi-chip die has. They can just go, yep, here's the golden samples. This goes here. This one's going to be cut down 10%. That's fine. That'll go to gamers. This will be cut down 20% and then driven down to lower voltages. That will go to professional customers or laptop. Basically, Nvidia thinks because they service so many different segments, so many different customers, and there are benefits to being monolithic, think, even if it costs more, that at least they can launch their stuff on time, and with how many different customers they work with, this is the way to go. And in fact, they point to the issues AMD had launching Navi 31, where it came out late and with problems, and they go, yeah, we don't think we want any of that. AMD, have fun saving money, but it seems like it's mostly just causing you headaches, and we think our software and our design and launch cadence will keep us in the lead. But then I brought up the fact that nodes after 3 nanometer may have a reticle limit of 400 millimeters squared. What is Nvidia going to do about that when they seem so hell-bent on launching these gigantic monolithic dies that are 600 to 850 millimeters squared every generation? And I was told, oh well, maybe we'll just stop making a 90 class. We want to be an AI company by then. Anyways, and that is when I got even more fascinated by how Nvidia's looking at things right now. Basically, to me, it seems like Nvidia just feels like they need to be 1 to 2 years ahead of AMD in software, and then just keep executing their new generations on time and keep pivoting towards becoming an AI company. And over time, they'll be fine if all they offer is some like $10,000 monster like hopper for those that want crazy performance, and then just stop making kind of a normal high-end card and just keep making mid-range or lower for gamers, mostly for laptop, let's be honest. And, well, you know what? If you want the best, pay a crazy amount. If you don't, get our more efficient mid-range cards that will have better software. That's how Nvidia sees it. And I gotta be honest, I see Nvidia's point. I mean, look, as long as they can continue to grow their AI business, continue to find customers for their chiplet GPUs that really are only using chiplets to become massive, not really to save on money, and then just keep staying a year or two ahead of AMD in software so their mid-range cards can look like they're better, even though they're smaller dies, I can honestly see why Nvidia is doing this. It's not to say I entirely agree that this is the right strategy, but it's not a strategy born out of pure hubris or stupidity. And, well, this is where I tell you what AMD's perspective is. Basically, I just think what AMD wants to do is they're not going to go as aggressively into mid-range or low-end bargain pricing as you might want them to be, but what they're hoping to do is win a grinding 10-year war of attrition against GeForce. Look, RDNA 3 may have had a bumpy takeoff, but it's in the air. It's flying. I think that AMD thinks, even though Nvidia looks like they have a massive advantage now, as long as they can keep at least decent margins on all of their products, go for market share a little bit here and there when it entirely makes sense, they can just keep combining 6 nanometer, IO dies with cutting edge 4, then 3, then 2 nanometer dies to save money and drive up performance. And eventually, especially if they get complex configurations working with multiple cutting edge graphics dies there, they can make cards that have over 1,000 millimeters squared of silicon. Nvidia can't make cards that big monolithically, and they can just try to slowly get to a position where gen after gen, by RDNA 5, they have something that's just so big Nvidia technically can't reach that performance. And then in the mid-range, because half of the die is on 6 nanometer, their stuff is a lot cheaper. But to bring things full circle, I'll close on this. This week, I asked one of my Nvidia contacts, that issue you have with needing to make the bus width smaller on newer nodes to make up for the lack of them shrinking and the rising silicon costs, that really wouldn't be an issue if you could use a 6 nanometer chiplet for your bus width, would it? And the person said, yeah, you have a point. AMD has a strategy that makes sense as well. And I just think that's fun to think about the fact that both of these companies see what each other's doing, doesn't think each other are stupid, but still thinks they've got the better idea. And I guess we're just going to have to see who has the better strategy. But I thought you guys might enjoy a video that does less of an attempt to get out a bunch of early leaks and just tells you really what to expect in the next couple years in graphics and why these companies are making the decisions they're making. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to Moore's Law Z on YouTube. Make sure you ring the bell button and also support our sponsors if you need their products, and consider supporting us on Patreon. This year, we really want to get the patron numbers up to expand our offerings and expand the quality of the content, and also just expand the things we give out to our patrons that doesn't require a bunch of ads and releasing on the right date and all of that. And so, you know, if you have just $2 a month, new Die Shrink came out, you get like a 1-hour video just for $2 a month that came out this week, and more video and podcast content is coming out every week as well, just for patrons. And then, of course, if you support us on Patreon, you can ask us questions. Ask that Infinity Ward guest what he thinks about VRAM capacities, and submit free reader mails to the live stream that's going to happen early next week. There's a ton of content out there for you if you support us on Patreon. But no matter what, if you made it this far, thank you for watching.